Hello, welcome to the Official Spotlight and Procurement podcast. My name is Simon Lipscomb, and thank you very much for listening. Today, I'm delighted to say that my guest is Piotr Teodorczyk, who was until very recently CPO at Suntory, which is one of the largest drink manufacturing businesses in the world. Presently in the transition. I won't spoil any of that. I'm sure that information will be forthcoming on Piotr's LinkedIn in due course. But he's previously held roles as the CPO at OFI, the global food and beverage business, and Olam, as well as senior roles in Mondelez and Kraft Foods. So Piotr, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate your time today. You've obviously had an amazing career, worked in some really big organizations. And actually, and we'll come on to talk about this, you've also worked all over the world in some of these big organizations. But generally, I think a lot of what you've done is transformation in procurement and transformation of procurement functions. And it's a subject that we get asked a lot about by the audience on the podcast. So it would be great perhaps to start with someone with that level of experience in those types of organizations, what you've seen, what you've learned over your career when you've looked at these big transformation projects.
Yeah, Simon, thanks a lot. First of all, very good morning, and thanks a lot for having me today. It's absolutely pleasure, to be with you today and have opportunity to share a little bit of myself and a little bit of my experience with the audience. So again, thanks a lot for the opportunity. And I think you asked the great question. The transformation is something which we are seeing all around us, and specifically, downstream and upstream supply chain. It's happening as we speak, and I think we are living in a tremendously interesting times because we have these very new additions of the transformation, which is, of course, the AI and the digitalization. And I guarantee, which is going to change the things 180 degrees or maybe 200 degrees different from what we have now and what we have seen in the 5 years. So our industry, the way we do procurement, the way we do supply chain, in 10 years from now is going to be completely different. We are going to be in a very different environment, very different landscape. So that's perhaps my main takeaway. So procurement always been transforming, and this is procurement always been trying to catch up with the business, to be as close as the business and so as business centric and customer centric as possible, which means constantly transforming itself and following the changing business environment and changing business needs. But again, I think this new edition of the AI and digitalization it's adding completely different context in terms of our ability to change and our ability to serve business even better. And I would use maybe this one word, is this unique opportunity to move from being reactive into much more proactive and to being from descriptive into much more prescriptive. So these two things, this is actually such an amazing opportunity to us, such amazing change, which we have never seen before. We never had this chance to change ourselves so much in the past. Again, to us, it's just a brilliant opportunity, which all of us encourage to jump on immediately. Don't wait. The time is the train is leaving the station already. This is
Go
time
now.
To jump now.
Yeah, I'd love to come on and talk a little bit about your thoughts on what the future of procurement looks like in the context of AI. But perhaps if we get to that, if we look back at some of these big transformation projects that you've done, I'm probably interested in a couple of things. One, when you get the call to come into these organizations as the kind of leader, how do you approach the problem? How do you size it? And from the experience you've had, what makes a successful leader of a transformation project in procurement, or indeed any transformation project, right?
And this is the great question, Simon. And maybe starting from the second one, what makes this transformation to stick? What was the binding element of having many different aspects of the transformation, and how to make it successful? I think it's make it very culture, context driven. So transformation is usually about the changing how the people work, adding a little bit of the maybe technology and spice up the things with the new tools. But what's really binding this all together and what's really makes all these changes sticky is the culture. So understanding the culture, I think, is perhaps the biggest challenge and the biggest opportunity to every leader. And you may hear the saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast, which I don't believe. I think it's actually a very wrong statement, because you can have a great culture but still very poor strategy, and it doesn't gonna bring you anywhere, not even close where you want to be. So actually the mix of both is equally important. But I think culture is this element which is like binding all the individual elements of the transformation together. And I have been privileged, to work across different cultures, high context cultures in Asia,
Yeah.
which is more consensus driven, and low context cultures in Europe and US, which is more, process and data driven. I think being aware of these differences, being aware about what's working, what's not working, and making them, integral part of your strategy. This is the key element of the success.
Piotr, I'd love to understand that a little bit more. So even the way you talked about the different cultures that you've worked in, to me, even that was new. So I'd love to. I'd like and forgive me, but you talked about cultures in Asia having a set. Just for our audience, could you kind of bring that to life a little bit more? For me, that's all new, right?
Yeah, and this is the fascinating subject, and Simon, and I'm giving you a warning. I can talk about this for hours. So if you ask me the wrong question, we're gonna blow this podcast. But maybe the simplest way to describe it is by giving you the example. And I think the good example is how we run the performance management process across the different cultures. And there are two elements of this. So the performance measurement in terms of the KPIs, the dashboard, it's something which we, of course, want to make it universal. So we want to use the same KPIs across all the countries, because there are these few numbers, these few measurements which are important to us globally. Doesn't matter if that's a business in Japan, if this is the business in Vietnam, if this is the business in Germany or in US. We want to deliver the same in terms of the sales revenue, savings, you name it. So the performance measurement is universal, but the delivery of the performance, so delivery message of how we are performing, this is a culture context driven. And the very, very simple example in how we do the performance measurement in Europe is that we talk about the numbers and we talk about, okay, there are the few things which has been delivered, there are few things which has not been delivered, which we missed. We can talk about how big the gap is and how we ensure this gap will not be in place in the next performance review. So that's a low context, which is very process data driven culture. In a high context culture, we talk more about suggestions of the improvements. So we talk less about the individual contributions. We talk more about consensus-driven group delivery, because that's how high context cultures in Asia and specifically in Japan, how these cultures are working, how they are driven. They are driven by consensus and they are driven by the group-centric activities, much less by the individual achievements. So again, the performance is universal. The way we deliver the performance message and measurement, this is culture driven. And again, it's critical to understand it, because if you mess it up, then it's not gonna to work the way you want this to be working as a leader.
Yeah. Fascinating. And Piotr, is that something you've learned just through experience, or is that how have you come to that understanding?
Yeah, I learned that some of this I learned hard way by making the mistakes and then facing, the results of my mistakes. Then later I started actually to study that a lot, and obviously we have tons of the materials available, everywhere. I had also had the privilege to work with few brilliant coaches, who just helped me to, be more self-aware and be more open-minded to the things around me. And I think this is the magic word, the self-awareness. You need to be aware about these differences, because once you start being aware about these differences, then you can start, proactively learn about them and then put them in a context and put them in the action.
Fascinating. And then, Piotr, as a successful leader of a transformation, then so you need to have some understanding, particularly of a big global one. So you need to have some understanding of kind of culture, and you touched on that. If someone's listening to this and about to undertake a big transformation, what are the other key attributes to success?
You mean beyond the culture, or within the culture?
As the leader, so you need a cultural context, but are there other skills that you as a leader need to be successful?
That's a great question. I would think as a leader, it's important to make it business relevant, of course, So once we make it, so every transformation needs to deliver. We need to be clear about what the problem is and what problem we are trying to solve by doing the transformation. So having this context very well defined and And I'm very consciously using this word define because, I have seen in a couple of the cases where people tend to overcomplicate it, so build
Okay.
very complex strategies, which they've then been leading into the not very well defined transformation. And when I say not very well defined, in a way that what actually we are going to change down the road, So in a simplistic terms, it should be just three stops: where we are
Yep.
versus where we want to be, and have that defined in a more simplistic way. If that's going to be 100 pages, perhaps, that's not the right way. It should be perhaps, we should able to condense that down to the one page of where we are versus where we want to be, and then
Yep.
the rest is to define, how to get that, how to get there in terms of the timing, in terms of the resources, in terms of the tooling, investments, you name it. But having that clarity done well, and it will done not by procurement, but done with the business, because this is about being as business centric as possible. I think this is the second very, very critical element of every transformation.
That makes sense. That makes sense. I guess fundamentally a lot of transformation is human, right? Like companies are full of people, and the things that you need to change are partly
Yeah.
people. Like I'd love to get your perspective on the kind of human approach to transformation, as opposed to the technology. And we'll come on and talk about AI because there's probably something specific there as well. But yeah, just that balance between the kind of human element of transformation as opposed to the systems or the processes or the
Yeah.
technology, right?
I think my takeaway is very simple. You cannot make the transformation successful and sticky if this will be not very much human-centric activity. And when I say human-centric, I mean, I think we have seen a very interesting shift of the approach, regarding to the AI, in the last 5 years, because in the
Okay.
5 years ago, AI projects has been assuming that the AI tooling will replace people, and because of heavy implementation of the AI
Yep.
agents, we'll have less staff, so we'll be this will result in the layoffs. I think what we think now is very different context, that we keep the people, but we just ask them to deliver more. And then that's going to require very different set of the skill sets of the people, which we want now to, start using AI and all the available tooling in the most efficient way. But that simply means that within the same staff, within the same, organization, we can have much higher levels of the productivity, higher level of the savings, and higher level of the. And again, this total shift from being reactive into much more forward-looking and proactive approach. So I call it now the human-centric AI gentification, which is enhancing people's capabilities. It's not replacing people; it's enhancing people's capabilities with the new tooling, with the new digital. And I think this is, to me, a kind of the core approach. So this is exactly the way we should treat every single transformation. It's about helping people to work more efficient way, to be engaged into more meaningful and strategic activities. And then by doing this, bring more value to the business, and be more relevant to the business, and be more customer centric, and to be more business centric. And the couple of the elements how to make it, one of the very critical element, I think, is the communication. And again, communication this is what makes people excited about the transformation. This is how you drive the ownership of the transformation, is how you make your people engage, or how you make them disengage if you make your communication wrong, and if the people will feel threatened, and they will feel that as a result of the transformation they are going to lose their jobs. So it's a super important part of every single transformation.
Yeah, you mentioned that point, which is really interesting about the move from the idea that AI is basically going to get rid of people to actually it's going to allow people to do more. Because I think, it's very unscientifically, if you took a straw poll of a number of our colleagues in procurement, I think you would still find plenty of people that think actually part of what AI is about is getting rid of people. So I'm really interested to kind of understand what's prompted that change from, is it a over-promising of the capabilities of AI, or is it that organizations how's that changed?
I think this is the development of the AI tooling itself, and there's on the one hand side a realization that AI, itself is not going to resolve all of our problems, and AI itself is not magic wand which makes everything now working perfectly, and that is important. tasks and elements of the process which still needs to be heavily human driven in order to make this new ecosystem as efficient and as effective as we want it to be, which again brings us, I think, back to this evolution. And you might be right, this might be first signs of this evolution. I have seen it personally in my last job in Suntory, where we made a heavy digitalization of the procurement without any single layoff, and simply having this very fundamental approach from the one that we equipping people with the new tools and helping them to enhance on their capabilities rather than replace them by the tool. So I think we'll see more and more of that user cases in the real world.
Yeah, fascinating. And you mentioned at the start of the conversation that I think you said get on the train now, right? Because it's happening. And you said, the future of procurement in 10 years won't look anything like it looks at the moment. What is it going to look like in 10 years? Well, a large global, FMCG business, what will procurement look like in 10 years?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Simon. I'm not sure
It's very unfair.
if I know. I think so there's a bit of the crystal ball,
Yeah, quite.
What I would strongly suspect, there are few areas of which will be very much changed or improved, and I would start with the first one, which will be, I think, most of the transactional job purely, filling the spreadsheets or filling the numbers or do this, freeway matching, etc., which you would be surprised how much of this job is still existing and is still done by very much hands-on human operations across most of the big corporates, in the world.
Yeah.
So I think this is the moment where we'll finally see that this will disappear, and this is going to be heavily automated, because this is exactly this kind of the activity where AI agents, they flourish. They are exactly designed to make it right, and they make it in such a cost-effective, cost-efficient way that I think, just by comparing this cost, and this cost arbitrage is so big that it will force that change. So this transactional thing, I think, will start going to be finally being completely flushed away from procurement. The second thing, which I strongly believe we see coming now, is to this ability to be much more forward-looking. And what I mean by that, I will give you the examples of the commodities. So you already today, it's possible to start having some AI-driven agents from the markets, which give us much better predictability on the crop patterns, for example, for cocoa or for coffee, based on the supply and demand situation, but also based on the tariffs, based on the, again, climate changes, the forecasted temperature patterns, or the rain patterns. So something which has been always for the long time on the table. I don't think it's been very successful, and I truly believe that we'll see many of these engines and many of the solutions much more effective and much more kind of practical, again, giving procurement kind of very solid, very pragmatic and very practical insights about what we are expecting to happen across these few commodities, not in the matter of the next 2 weeks, but in the matter of maybe 18 months, and so that I think this will change quite a lot about how we dealing with the commodities, how we are forecasting, and how we manage the risk, how we doing the risk management for the commodities going forward.
Probably conscious of time. My last question: are you, given all that change, given all of that technology, are you excited about the future of our profession?
I'm very excited. I think, Simon, procurement is always a little bit in a sweet spot, because in the interaction of, marketing, R&D, supply chain, and suppliers. And if you are lucky, your CEOs, and you have a seat at the table with your CEO, you are the one who can channel all of this exciting news directly to him. So I think it's a very unique moment of time for us as a procurement community, for us as a function. And again, I'm always saying this, it's only up to us how we use that opportunity, how we jump on that opportunity. But I think it's almost kind of once in a life. So I think the future is bright, Simon. Absolutely.
Brilliant. That feels like a perfect place to draw to conclusion. Piotr, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat. It's fascinating to get perspectives on transformation for someone like yourself that's done some of these big roles all across the world. So thank you for taking the time to talk to us about that today.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Simon. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please give us a click on the follow button on your chosen podcast platform. We'd also love to hear your views on either future topics or indeed if you've got any thoughts on future guests that we should look to get onto the podcast. Thanks again. See you next time.